Good afternoon. Welcome to the special meeting of the 3rd of February, requested through proper process by a group of 4 councillors. I note the attendance of all councillors. I note the absence of the CEO and the General Manager, People and Strategy, sitting as acting CEO for the purpose of today's meeting. Contrary to some of the popular myth, the matters we're dealing with today are very much governance matters, and same as they were the last meeting, and there's nothing inappropriate for the CEO to participate. However, there are other matters that the CEO does need to attend to, and the GM is acting in that role today. Note also that 2 others of the GMs for Customer and Regional Prosperity and Asset and Environment Sustainability have also been granted leave from today's discussions because of the specificity of their content, and that the GM Council Sustainability is in attendance along with the Principal Specialist Governance to provide technical and advisory support to the operation of council. So I believe that deals with item 1, item 2, and potentially also any other apologies. If not, we come to item 4, and that's the dealing with declarations of interest by members. I'm advised by the acting CEO there's been no such notifications of declarations. However, councillors, in accordance with the requirements of section 150 EW of the Local Government Act 2009, I am required to advise the chair of this meeting, which in this case is me, if I reasonably believe or suspect that another councillor has a prescribed or declarable conflict of interest pertaining to a decision of council without having declared that conflict of interest. Councillors, I therefore advise of my reasonable belief that 4 councillors have declarable conflicts of interest regarding matters 5.1 and 6.1 before the meeting today, being councillors Swanborough, Chalk, McConnell and McInnes. I will seek to proceed to outline the basis of that belief for each circumstance. First of those declarations, I hold a reasonable belief that Councillor Swanborough has a declarable conflict of interest in deciding on the matters 5.1 and 6.1, the subject of this special meeting.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor. Yes?
I just need to plug this in.
No, you don't. You were on.
It's on?
Councillor.
It's on? Okay. Mr Mayor, what you are suggesting in making a declaration about me is contrary to Standing Order 20.6, in that it is in contravention of the Standing Orders of the Local Government Act.
Sorry, Councillor. I'm not understanding the basis on which you're stating that.
Mr Mayor, there's been two council meetings, 2 special meetings so far. On both occasions, my conflict of interest has been considered under the standing orders. That is also, the process has been recorded also in the special meeting minutes of the council. And on both occasions, I do not have a declarable conflict of interest. And Mr Mayor, under standing orders of the council, and I refer to number 911 of the standing orders, procedures, administration and conduct, it says that a decision about a councillor who has a declarable conflict of interest in a matter applies in relation to the councillor for participating in the decision and subsequent decisions about the matter unless there is a change to the councillor's personal interest, nature of the matter being discussed. Well, the fact is, this matter's been talked about since September last year. It's gone to special meetings before. There's nothing new to discuss today at the end of the day, and there's nothing that's changed. On 2 occasions, no conflict of interest has been identified by the legal process, and as such, your assertion and attempt to declare that I do have a conflict of interest is contrary to the standing orders, as I have pointed out, and it should not be upheld.
So, Councillor, thank you for your point of order. If you'd allowed me to continue, there are new matters that I believe give rise to a conflict of interest that have not been considered by non-conflicted councillors. There are new matters, Councillor, that have arisen since the 12th of January that I do believe give substance for further consideration. But in light of your comments, I will step past some of the earlier declaration and I will focus to the points that are particularly relevant, and we may need to refer to some others for clarification along the way. So, with regard, Councillor,
Mr. Mayor, you really need to rule on my point of order.
Well, Councillor, I'm ruling against your point of order because this is new information. It is not information that has been considered for a conflict of interest previously.
Mr. Mayor, you're going to explain what that new information is?
Well, if you'd give me the chance to, Councillor. If you'd give me the chance to, please. Thank you. Councillors, I note that today's meeting has been called as a result of a joint request signed by 4 councillors, including Councillor Swamborough. I note that that request has at its foundation some engagement between Councillor Swamborough as the initiator of the private matter still covered by confidentiality requirements, and 3 councillors, being Councillors McConnell, Chalk, McInnes, outside of the reasonable and proper process for communication between the parties regarding that matter, and without engagement with other affected parties within that matter, including at least 2 other councillors. The councillors initiating the special meeting request are properly aware of reliable legal advice that the changed circumstance concerning Councillor Swamborough's private matter advised to them by Councillor Swamborough cannot be relied upon until the expiry of 28 days from the 14th of January 2022. I hold reasonable belief that the changed circumstance that Councillor Swamborough has now advised these 3 councillors demonstrate that the councillor could be seen to have changed position on the confidential matter in question because he has achieved the negative impact toward the CEO through the decision he participated in on the 9th of November 2022. Further, I reasonably believe that his action in joining with 3 other councillors in making a decision to ignore legal advice made available to them that proceeding at this time would be compromising the interests of council and other parties, and seeking to proceed at this time could be seen by a reasonable person, provided the full information. The council is acting this matter to benefit his personal circumstance in the matter and to disadvantage the position of council, thereby ratepayers. I also note that beyond the request for a special meeting as a proper request, the council, in concert with other parties, has made and communicated to the CEO decisions relating to 2 business matters that can only properly be determined and enacted through transparent process of an ordinary or special meeting. As the content of that communication is currently confidential, I cannot explain the detail publicly, but non-conflicted councillors can access this in the confidential attachments for today's meeting. I believe a reasonable person would recognise that these decisions are directly contrary to an existing resolution of council. Further, I would observe that Councillor Swamborough can also be reasonably seen to have participated in a decision process affecting the position of council as communicated to council officers in a covert process outside of the proper jurisdiction and transparency of either an ordinary meeting or a special meeting, as is required by legislation for such matters. His participation in this process can be reasonably seen to have subverted the proper role of collective council. On that basis, I believe a reasonable person would conclude it's not possible for Councillor Swanborough to maintain an unbiased position regarding items 5.1 and 6.1 in the agenda for this special meeting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, everything you have said does not convince me at all. All that information that you have presented has been in front of the councillors, and there is nothing new in relation to this. And so, as a result of your ruling that the point of order is upheld, I move a motion of dissent that your decision not be upheld in this circumstances, as there is no declarable interest.
I'm sorry, Councillor. I'd need to take procedural advice, but in terms of considering a declaration for a conflict of interest, I believe there's a proper process that needs to be upheld for transparency from a governance point of view, and can't merely be taken away by a procedural motion. I just seek guidance from the officers.
That's correct, Mr Mayor. That's my understanding. I mean, I'm referring to item 7 of the same standing orders about the process outlined in terms of reporting a suspected conflict of interest, where the due process required in once a suspicion that a conflict has been raised. Ultimately, I understand Councillor Swanborough's point around if the matter was the same, then there would be a validity around that. But I'm not one to, obviously I'm just pointing out the clarification or the clarity sought in terms of what was detailed there as compared to what was outlined.
Perhaps I can ask a different question. Councillor, can you identify on what occasion the matters I just read out have been considered regarding a conflict of interest for you by this council?
Mr Mayor,
Sorry.
Mr Mayor, all the information that is put before in your soliloquy at the start indicated that the council didn't know this information and there had been changed circumstances, when in fact that wasn't the case. And so I ruled a point of order, and you said you upheld the point of order, and it would explain that.
Sorry, Councillor, point of order. Sorry, Councillor, I did not uphold your point of order. I rejected your point of order and highlighted that I would clarify I was dealing with different information.
No, that's not correct, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, I believe that was what I said.
It wasn't correct, Mr Mayor.
Did not uphold your point of order, Councillor, because it clarified to you.
You said you dismissed my point of order, Mayor.
Correct.
And now under the standing orders, Mr Mayor, I am moving a motion of dissent because I don't believe it is allowable under item 10.4 of the standing orders, and that you are contravening, not 10.4, let's get the section again. You are contravening, as I said, just got to find it.
May I ask a question while Councillor Swan is looking for that?
I'll deal with this one first.
The councillor wishes to consider. I'm seeking some technical advice, whether and firstly to clarify the alignment between what the council is seeking to do and what the requirements for managing conflict of interest is. Are we able to gain some advice? Do we wish to adjourn for that, or do?
I think it's appropriate to adjourn for that, so I can research this a little bit further, because it's not an everyday.
Councillor, we will adjourn, noting that Councillor Swanborough is seeking to move a motion of dissent concerning the content of the proposed consideration for a conflict of interest. We'll adjourn for a moment.
Yeah, my motion of dissent is your ruling on a point of order that tries to introduce another time where you say I have a declarable conflict of interest, where that matter has been determined twice already, and under the standing order procedures 9.11, it makes it quite clear that once a council makes a decision on a matter and that matter remains the same, then you cannot raise another declaration against me, and that's what the issue is here.
Sorry, councillor. I hear what you're saying, and I believe what I've outlined to you is content that was not part of any prior declaration. It deals with actions and activities since the 12th of September, so therefore could not possibly have formed part of a prior consideration, and therefore could not have formed part of a proper matter of council or a consideration for a conflict of interest, which is why I asked for the leeway to clarify this was the new information, which has not been examined by unconflicted councillors previously.
Mr Mayor, it's totally inappropriate.
So-
you have called an adjournment, and yet you go and try and argue your case
Thank
like
you.
the meeting is still going.
Well, councillor, you continued to re-put your position, which is why I allowed you that discretion. I was trying to be respectful of your desire to keep elaborating the matter. So we will adjourn.
Before we do, can I just ask,
Right, so,
The only issue here is where
sorry, councillor, we are,
has changed. That is the issue.
and councillor, as I've indicated, the matter has changed. I believe the matter has changed. You've now moved a motion of dissent. We're back on, yes. You've sought to move a motion of dissent with a procedural motion of dissent with the discussion of your original point of order. And just to clarify, your dissent, councillor, please, is that the matter that I've clarified, you're suggesting has previously been considered.
No, Mr Mayor, it's not.
Sorry,
Mr
well,
Mayor,
I'm trying to
Mayor,
understand.
the issue here is that you are acting contrary to the standing orders of council by even saying when a matter hasn't changed. It hasn't changed since September. It didn't change in January. It is still the same matter. And on 2 occasions so far, that matter has been considered and all the relevant information at the time. And it has been deemed that I do not have a declarable interest on the matter that hasn't changed. Now, my point of order is that on your ruling, that you continue to pursue me to say that I have a declarable conflict of interest when I clearly don't. And the standing orders are under 9.11 clearly say that once council has decided on a declarable conflict of interest on a matter, if the matter doesn't change, then that lasts in perpetuity, unless the personal interest of the person changes under that section 911.
Can I just ask for clarification on what you're saying is the new information?
What
is the new information?
As I described, I shall try to paraphrase, it is the participation in decisions. There are 2 parts to it. There are participation in decisions that were based on legal advice, were contrary to the interest of council, whilst knowing that that as an individual he preserved his interests were being preserved in the discussions that have led, and this is difficult because of the discussions that have led to this have involved councillors outside of council, so it hasn't been transparent. And the second is that based on the communication to the CEO again, which is in confidential still at the moment, that there were 2 decisions identified there which the councillor participated in, which cannot be properly considered outside of the jurisdiction of an ordinary or a special meeting. And I can't discuss them because the detail of those, but they're clearly the additional paragraph in that correspondence, which is in confidential at the moment.
Mr Mayor, just to clarify, they're all assertions. You're making assertions. You're saying I've got legal advice that something's wrong. But there's no proof of that, and there's been no decision on any of those.
Point of order again to you, councillor. I am bound. I'm sorry that you've not understood this from me. The legislative obligation is to present reasonable suspicions and the basis for those reasonable suspicions. I haven't presented anything saying that is, I'm relying this on legal advice. I'm looking at the information that's been provided. I'm looking at the information that's available to me. I don't have full transparency. I'm putting forward what I believe are reasonable suspicions, which is what the process is then for the consideration of conflict of interest. It's the same. Reasonable suspicion is what we're required to present. That's what I've outlined.
So what is the conflict? In regards to the 9th of November meeting, what is the conflict that Councillor Swanborough has?
So I'm not talking about the 9th of November meeting, Councillor.
Well, that's what we're going back to, because that's what hasn't been implemented by this council.
Sorry, Councillor.
That's what this is all about.
Councillor, again, point of order for clarity. We have 2 agenda items today on the agenda of the special meeting, 5.1 and 6.1. Those are the 2 business matters that we're considering conflicts with. They're the only 2 matters that we're considering conflicts with. And that's the context. So I'm not trying to throw this wide, don't confuse, we are not discussing the 9th of November. We are discussing the governance process that is around how we consider 5.1 and 6.1.
Can I just ask the GM then? We submitted a letter to the CEO with 3 points. The business of the meeting will be. How have we now transferred into exactly what the mayor wants and not to what was sent to the CEO? Our 3 things to the CEO, the business of the meeting.
You cannot read them out.
Why not?
Well, councillor.
This was everyone knows it. This was put on our website.
And it was withdrawn.
Yeah, but it's out there. It's too late.
Well, councillor, it was withdrawn because it publicly discussed matters of the CEO's contract that we are.
No, it doesn't.
It does. Well,
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry about the CEO's contract, other than confirm what we had.
Councillor, we should let the GM respond. Sorry, Councillor, I will.
A point of order, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, is that document that I, as a signatory to, is not a confidential document, full stop. It's not deemed confidential by this council. It's not confidential to the local government. It is not confidential to anybody. I mean, we could publish it in the newspaper for all we care, but it is not a confidential document.
So, Councillor, and the officers might like to, there is a certain element of it that was of concern and was asked to be withdrawn from public to properly respect compliance with the governance requirements, the confidentiality requirements around the specifics involving the employment of the CEO.
There's nothing in that document that isn't already in an agenda item or has been discussed openly in council.
That might be your view.
The first one is to deal, I'll read them out, I don't care. The first one's to deal with the unresolved. This is on the internet. It's out there. It's too late. You can't withdraw it off the internet and then say, oh, it's no longer there. It's out.
So, well, Councillor, it's good to understand I respect that it was in error mounted and has been withdrawn.
It's not in error. This is not a secret document. This is open. We should be able to, as a council, say, I want to have a special meeting and this is what I want to discuss. We talk about open and transparent. You talk about open and transparent.
I do,
Councillor. And now you want to talk about keeping things secret.
Sorry.
There is nothing secret in this document.
Councillor, there are elements, I will say it again slowly, there are elements that the legislation identifies where you are talking about the employment of the CEO, that you should be prudent and maintaining confidentiality of that. There's
nothing in there about his contract.
Well, sorry, Councillor, that's your view. I believe there is wording there that the CEO would have a different view. But
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move
read it in public. So, Councillor,
it's already in public. We published it. Once it's on the internet, you can't just all of a sudden say, oh, it's now secret.
You wish to go down a path. Councillor still has his motion of dissent that he wishes to pursue. I'm trying to find out
what your new information is. There is nothing new about what we want to discuss. And I want to know how we went from our 3 items back to what the mayor needs.
Well, sorry, Councillor. First of all, I did not set the agenda and I resent and take great offence.
It seems to be going that way. You can take offence because nothing happens.
No, point of order, Councillor.
When you get offended, when you get offended, Mayor, nothing happens. You just get offended.
Councillor,
it's okay.
well, code of conduct, Councillor, please don't cast aspersions that you don't have basis to. If you want to lodge a conflict of interest declaration, that's fine. Put it as reasonable suspicion, but don't make an allegation you don't have a basis for, please.
Well, okay, can we get a ruling on why the 3 things that we wanted that were sent to the CEO do not appear as an agenda item? It changed purely back to what happened at the last meeting, the motion. There's the 3 things we wanted dealt with. And now we can't talk about them because it's not an agenda item. The mayor's saying we can't talk about these 3 things because it's not an agenda item.
You've asked me the
talk?
Yes, please, GM, if you can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per the request, obviously, I'll make it clear, I'll make it nice and clear so that all our avid listeners and all those alike can hear my voice properly. When the matters were put forward to convene a special meeting, obviously the CEO was conflicted and this was delegated to me. I was the acting CEO in that capacity. What was explained to the requesters was that items 2 and 3 weren't new business. They really related to the decision of 9th of November. So should the matter have today's business progressed to that, which was the around the repealing of the decision, then they could have just been added to that particular business. It's nothing new. As far as what's concerned, that decision from 9 November still stands. It's a resolution that still stands. So you're not reinterrogating that position at all whatsoever. What's always been the case from the 12th of January special meeting and even today's is all about a governance function. And we can take the references around offended things, but to me, it's intimidation. There's intimidations there, or there's certainly some things around. What was requested and what was put forward is incorrect. Now, I've taken notice of that, and obviously we'll take advice. Ultimately it's up to the decision of council. What the mayor was pointing out to before, it's a decision of council to release or anytime under 254J3, discussions relating to the CEO, dismissal, appointment, whatever, those items should be considered by council to be discussed in closed. Now, there wasn't an opportunity to say that this piece of document should be released or should be kept in confidential. But however, because it contained elements of the CEO's contract, and I won't read it out. I'll be respectful of the process. There's particulars in there that relate to that. I'm reading it in plain English. There's directions in there. So by publishing that and be it as it may, given that it was released, that we erred. And we did the necessary rectification because we didn't want to leave council in a compromised position of saying, well, why is that out in the public when it really did contain? Now, if it is decided that it's not deemed to be confidential, that's up to council to decide. It's not for office to decide whether something is confidential or not.
Then why did it go from open to confidential?
Well, but that's
Who
what
decided
I
that?
just said an error was made on my behalf because I didn't read it. All I read was what was required to be discussed on the day, which were pertaining. So the other areas where the response to the requesters was that the other items could form part of the business of item 6.1 because that's what they relate to about their repeal. So if council went down that line and reintegrated 6.1, you can discuss these matters at that point in time. They weren't new business.
Mr. Mayor, I want to reply to that, Mr. Mayor, because I don't believe the public are getting the full story in relation to this, and I'll do exactly what Councillor McConnell was going to do. There were 3 items here. If anybody wants to say that any of these 3 items that we requested be considered, are going to reveal confidential information about the CEO's contract, well, they must be reading a different language to me. Because the first one says we're going to deal with unresolved item 6.1 of the special meeting of January the 12th. The second thing says we're going to confirm the council's decision of the 9th of November. The third thing was that we're going to ask for a direction that the council majority decision be given to the CEO in accordance with his employment contract. What is there about that is so sensitive?
I note that you have no desire to respect the chair. I'm disappointed with that.
Mr. Mayor, before I was finishing, a solution could be a procedural motion to make this public, which is what I was saying. The power wasn't vested in officers to determine whether or not this popped. So a solution could be resolved within the chambers is to allow the release of that letter to make it public. That's what I'm saying is that. So,
Through you, Mayor, could I make a...
Stop.
Could I?
Please, just,
Duncan,
the feedback we had last time was that people continue to choose to speak over each other. Can we please, this is a very complex, these are complex matters, they're frustrating matters, and it's important to maintain civility, but to allow sequence of conversation and not just to launch in, please.
Just
So,
a
Councillor
question.
Enright.
Yeah, a question to the GM, if I may. The question is, in the correspondence from the requesters of the special meeting, was there in that process an understanding of what the agenda items will be? And if so, was there any questions raised about what items would be put forward and what the description of those agenda items were?
Thank you, Councillor Enright. It was detailed in a way, and I guess the like anything, the process in convening a meeting is obviously there's part negotiation with the requesters to make sure the necessary details. But rather than skirt around the topic of being cautious of what we're disclosing about the document, I would refer back if the intent so that it can be discussed and openly talked about in public without any recourse or action is going through the procedural motion to make that public. That way then it's open and is my suggestion, Chair.
Thank you, which was where I was going to head, but didn't get the opportunity because of all of the volume. So Councillor Swamborough, I heard say he would move that procedural motion. The question I would ask of the councillor is it, in light of the comments and concerns about some of the subparts of that, which unfortunately have now been read into public, would it have been...
Mr Mayor, they're already in public. They're already posted
Councillor,
online.
I note this council, this chamber can't deal with the world of what social media is doing. We have to deal through the process of what our process is doing. Whether that aligns or not, I note your view that people have already grabbed it and taken it into other worlds. I note that. That's not the process we're dealing with. We're dealing with the situation where we've been, because of the concern of an affected party, that his interests and his reasonable expectations under the legislation were breached by having some of that in public. He asked for some of that to be in confidential. The proposal of a procedural motion to bring it back into the open, all I'm asking the councillor is to consider, will that procedural motion consider respecting that request for confidentiality of some parts of that without affecting the materiality of what you want to bring back? That's my only question. I'm trying to be objective and fair and consider all interests, and we have an obligation to treat with respect our employees. That was my point, Councillor Swamborough.
Mr Mayor, does everybody have a copy of that request for the special meeting?
Well, Councillor, it's in the confidential attachment to the meeting. So, but the point of, I think, of the last 10 minutes has been to be able to understand the nature of what I was describing as conflict, Councillor McConnell, as new matters since the 12th of September, need to be able to bring better clarity than I was able to without having the document in public.
I still don't understand what the new information is.
Well, Councillor, I can clarify that.
In layman's term, give me layman's term, what has changed in regards to what we discussed on the 9th of November in regards to conflict for Councillor Swamborough, and again on the 12th? What is the new information?
Councillor, it relates to participation in 3 decision points. 3 decision points since the 12th of September. 2 of them are included in this document. The 12th of January, sorry, what did I say? 12th of January. 2 of them are included in this document, and from the description, firstly, appear to address issues that can only be considered properly by the chamber within an ordinary meeting or a special meeting, and secondly, appear to include a decision and an action contrary to an existing resolution of council. Quite serious items. Then the third one is the participation in a decision, fundamentally trying to simplify this down with 3 other councillors, that knowing there was with the changed circumstance that the councillors had become aware of outside of the proper communication process, which is again happened since the 12th of January, that in fact they had that they have acted and made a conscious decision to continue to act in a way that preserved the rights of a private complainant and compromised the interest of council by moving before a particular date on this special meeting. And
So just enlighten me, being the new kid on the block still. So if councillors want to, yeah, I know, I keep saying it for another 4 years. If councillors want to ask for a special meeting, how do they do it? If we can't go to each other and say, hey, I don't think this is right, we need a special meeting.
So
you're saying that was secret and secretive and it wasn't?
No, Councillor, I have quite clearly articulated, and it's disappointing.
Well, you haven't, because I don't understand what you're saying.
Councillor, I clearly recognised that the special meeting request was properly made. It is the additional communications and the additional decisions beyond the meeting request that were not decisions that could reasonably be made outside of an ordinary meeting, because that the legislation doesn't consider that, and also where a decision, particularly a decision to move after being advised that whilst a matter might be withdrawn, it actually needs to be considered as remaining in force because the rights of the private complainant remain in force for 28 days, that by moving ahead of that compromises the position of council and preserves fully the rights of that individual, and involving that individual in the decision of that without involving the proper consideration of the whole chamber where the interests of council are being considered in that matter, would a reasonable person, this is about reasonable suspicion, a reasonable person would look at that and say, how is that in the interest of council? That's why I'm saying this is all new information since the 12th of September. January.
Mr. Mayor, may I, in light of the complexities of the discussion, while the document that's being referred to is a confidential document of council, is creating a degree of complexity because we're not able to reveal the detail of that document. May I recommend that a procedural motion be put forward to make that document
and that was my request to Councillor Swan, was whether he would consider any variation of that to preserve the interests of the affected party.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to move a procedural motion that this document be tabled.
So you've answered my question.
Clarification. It doesn't supersede my procedural motion, which still is on the table.
The motion of the request for a meeting be tabled, is that the one you're doing, Councillor?
The attachment.
So if that's the case, it should be read out again. You read part of it out, but I think it's
through you.
Oh, yeah, sorry, as soon as it's voted
Through
on.
you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
If we seek the affordability of Councillor Swamber in firstly, because you've got to deal, the standing orders require you to deal with one procedural motion followed by another one. If you're happy to withdraw that one, and then we can then deal with the release and then go back to that one if. No, that's.
Sorry, Councillor, can I clarify? I believe, can I give a perspective here? Councillor McConnell has asked further clarity about what's the new information before he believes he can fairly consider your motion of dissent. And therefore, we would need to withdraw your motion of dissent to consider the motion to recover the confidential document, redacted or not redacted. That seems to be not redacted. And to then be able to explain in more detail. And then you can retable that.
As long as it doesn't disappear, Mayor, that's all I'm asking.
Don't think there's any chance of that, Councillor. Councillor Swamborough, let's move that, yes.
Is that correct? Yes.
Sorry,
Doesn't need a seconder, does it?
procedural
Yep.
motion. So Councillor McConnell
Second it.
is
It doesn't
not
It doesn't need it?
required.
Okay.
Councillor, sorry.
Can I ask a question then? And we won't read it out just yet. Which line of this document do you believe is confidential? What in that document, which line, so we can say, what part of that do you want redacted? Anyone? I'll take anyone's answer.
I guess in the interpretation,
Which line? You tell me which line.
it's probably the lines associated with points of business 2 and 3. Yeah, that pertain to the CEO's contract. So any discussion whatsoever around, under section 254J3A should be confidential. Yeah, needs to be decided by council that you either discuss that in closed or in open session. It's not an ability of an officer to make that determination.
But what's confidential?
Could I just a point, please? Does that mean, General Manager, that the only other word that hasn't been open there to everyone is the word confirming? Everything else has been all that motion, all that point 2 is just confirming, and we'll go. Yes. The other words have been there since November the 9th.
That's correct. And again, it's a similar, refer back to the 11th of November meeting. Yeah, that matter pertaining to the CS contract was discussed in close. Was it 11th? 9th of November. So
yeah.
Dates. That matter was because it pertains to CS, and that's what we're saying. But the inclusion of those words where it related to the appointment of the CEO or dismissal or whatever. So I'm just reading the definition under 254J3. Anything to do with the tenure, I guess, of the employment of the CEO. There's a consideration for that needed to be decided upon by council to either discuss in open or closed, and that shouldn't be a decision of an officer.
So the procedural motion is now on the table.
So Councillor McConnell, if I were to hazard, leaving aside 1 and 2, 3 talks, makes some suggestions, and the way it's worded suggests the existence of things in the employment contract which isn't factual. Which isn't factual.
Not for me.
Well, again, I can't talk about it in open, but the last half of that reads and can be read as a suggestion that that indicated time period is within his employment contract, which it's not.
That's right.
So I'm saying the way that's disclosing that gives a suggestion of information that's not factual and creates That's why I think that one's,
I think you're reading too far into that one,
well,
because that was already a resolution to council.
No,
3 was already something that,
sorry, councillor, that wasn't. That was not
on
right.
the 9th,
That was not the resolution of council. That was not. You're wrong, councillor. That was clarified last meeting.
Can I just ask,
Sorry,
Mayor, through you,
Councillor
no,
West.
that's right.
would you be happy, Councillor McConnell, just to have the last
No,
107
no, 'cause-
days? I haven't finished, just
Sorry,
let me-
councillor, please.
Yeah,
just-
right out.
would you
you've
be
had-
happy, like, to remove the last 3 words within 7 days? Just finish after contract.
Sorry, councillor, you're now discussing the content. Please, just.
Content's already, don't worry, Mr Mayor, it's already out there.
Well, councillor,
We posted it online.
councillor, again, it's disappointing you want to be frivolous about.
I'm not being frivolous.
Proper
but
process.
It's already out there.
I don't deal in the world of what's on social media.
It's not social media.
Here,
It was on our website.
Through you, Chair, just to get the process moving, there's a procedural motion there which will disallow any concerns around this, so that it will make it open, so that, we're just trying to make, dot the i's and cross the t's when it comes to process, and that's what it's all
We'll
it's all about.
clarify that your statement's false then, councillor, perhaps. So we have a procedural motion. Councillor Swanborough, you obviously want to speak to it.
Mr Mayor, in accordance with the standing orders, it should be that the confidential attachment be tabled, and standing orders indicate that once a document is tabled, then it becomes a public document.
Is that all you want to say to your motion, councillor?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Can I-
Wish to speak against councillor McGuinness?
Probably should, shouldn't I? It's probably from a clarification, just for confusion for people. Item 5.1, we have 2 5.1s. If I can reopen that again.
We have one agenda item 5.1 and an attachment to item 5.1. And then we have agenda item 6. We have a 6.1, which is confidential. Well, there's too many people with microphones on.
Yep.
Councillors, please.
Okay, no,
Councillor Swanborough,
that-
can you please?
Yeah, Councillor McGuinness, that's just a requirement to allow that not being disclosed. So for the elected members to be able to read their business papers, it's provided in there, but it's.
Does that clarify your concern, Councillor McGuinness? Yep.
Mayor, a question.
Councillor Enright.
A question to Councillor Swanborough. Would he consider in his procedural motion the redaction of the last 3 words of point 3?
No, because if you took away those last 3 words, I mean, to me, the plain English of reading this document is that, action hasn't been taken, since the 9th of November. So if action is taken about item 2 on that document, then we're saying we want it tabled, done within 7 days. So that's why it's relevant. It wouldn't be relevant if we took away 7 days.
So my question is not changing the intent, but the redaction in the public space.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So thank you. So anyone wishing to speak against the procedural motion? I will just speak against it from the point of view of I was always intending to seek to bring this document out, but to allow for the respect of redacting some of the components so that they are properly discussed then when we are in the confidential space later. And I still believe that would be the proper respectful way to satisfy our obligations under legislation and to allow the level of transparency to deal with the particular issue that has been asked by Councillor McConnell. But anyone else wishing to speak for?
Yeah, I'll speak for. I believe there's nothing in this document that's one, not already out there, but that 2 shouldn't be out. The 3 words that we're talking about actually gives a timeline to the 9th of November motion that we did. Motion 1, in accordance with clause 6.1 of the CEO's employment agreement, Council advised the CEO, John Gibbons, in writing that Council does not intend to renew his employment agreement and will advertise. Unfortunately, what we didn't do there is we didn't put a time in there, and it's now 3 months. So that 3 words are not in the CEO's contract, and it's just to make sure that council enact on a resolution that was a majority decision of council. Thank you.
Sorry, and Councillor, it is worth noting there was a time frame in his contract that was being worked towards until other information. Right, but anyway, I note that. So, anyone else wishing to speak against? Anyone else wishing to? Yes, Councillor West.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. Look, I probably can't support the motion without the removal of those last 3 words, I guess, and I guess it's out of respect for the CEO and his requests, and certainly there's probably a bit more information that's come to light.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak for? Close, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, this document is signed by 4 councillors who are concerned that the action of the 9th of November, the resolution of council, the formalities hadn't been completed, and that opened the door for a motion to be rescinded. How and why that happened has not yet been determined, but it needs to be thoroughly investigated at some point in time. We are simply here today for 2 simple reasons. The first, and that is to do with just one thing, and that one thing is what we started talking about in September of last year, and that is, what is the majority view of council about renewing the CEO's contract? I think it's pretty plain to us and the public and everybody who's been following this that the majority is that they do not want this to be the case. And this document was an attempt to have a meeting so that we could put that to bed once and for all, because it's been frustration after frustration after frustration by whoever is feeling guilty at the moment, because we haven't been able to affect that resolution. And why is that, is my question.
So put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried. Division called, Division 1, 2, 5 and 6, 4, and those against Divisions 3, 4 and Mayor. Now that the document is tabled, Councillor McConnell, would you wish me to provide more clarity about some of the aspects that I was alluding to that are new since the 12th of September?
In regards to the CEO's contract?
No, in regards to the conflict of interest. Remember
Okay.
the dissent? Yep. So
go for it.
What I have, sorry, Councillor.
Shouldn't we, pertinent for those who are listening in, shouldn't we actually read what is going to go into open session?
Well,
what we've just voted on.
We can.
People.
I'm happy to read it out.
Well, we can read the whole thing, but that's half of it's already been read.
I'm happy to read it out if you want, Mr. Mayor.
Well, yeah, Councillor, why not?
Okay, thank you. Okay, the letter was to John Gibbons, Chief Executive Officer, from Councillor Duncan McGuinness, Councillor Marshall Chalk, Councillor Jeff McConnell, Councillor Derek Swanborough, dated the 14th of January 2022. We request a special meeting to the Chief Executive Officer. As per the requirements under Council's Standing Orders, Administration and Conduct Procedure, CM 03.01 PR.02, we, the following councillors, provide the required written notice to the CEO to call a special meeting at the earliest possible time. The business of the meeting will be to 1. Deal with the unresolved item 6.1 of the special meeting of January 12th, 2022. 2. Confirm the council's decision of council of 9th of November 2021 in regards to item 11.1, late item reappointment of the Chief Executive Officer. 3. A direction that council majority decision be given to the CEO in accordance with his employment contract within 7 days. The Honourable Minister and Deputy Premier has been advised that there no longer exists any conflicted councillors as identified at the special meeting of the 12th of January 2022, as the action that may have given rise to the alleged conflict has been withdrawn. Confirmation of this action has been supplied to the Minister. Signed, Councillor McGuinness, Councillor Chalk, Councillor McConnell and Councillor Swanborough.
Thank you, Councillor. And the two decisions that I refer to, that I'm saying, and for Councillor Swanborough, which is new information, but is also information that will be relevant in the other three declarations. The determination of whether or not a conflict of interest exists for any councillor is the subject of a public, ordinary or special meeting, not of a private consideration by councillors. Secondly, the fact is that the matter cannot properly be considered as completed until the full 28-day cooling off period is completed. So in making that decision, it's been based on an inaccurate timeframe and an inaccurate expectation. And then the last part is, given there was a resolution about the process to communicate with the Minister, communicating to the Minister a direction on behalf of Council, contrary to what was an existing resolution, it flies in the face of what proper, transparent process is for that to have been a determination of an ordinary meeting. So those are the aspects that were in there that I am referring to, that these are new matters since the 12th of January. That is why I indicated earlier to the councillor, when we come back to his motion of dissent, we will come back to the point, these are new matters that hadn't been considered before as the basis for a conflict with the fair and unbiased consideration of the matters before council today. And I respect that there are different views on it, but I'm pointing out those are the new matters. That is why I rejected the notice of motion originally. The councillor wishes to return to his motion of dissent.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I certainly do want to go back to my motion of dissent, because that motion of dissent says that your attempt to raise an issue and you've tried to explain, you know, why you're raising it. I don't understand it. I don't think anybody's going to have, everybody will have difficulty understanding what you're trying to say, but it doesn't sound too much like, you know, the matter of why we're here today. And so the order of dissent is that you don't have, under the standing orders, the jurisdiction or the authority to go against previous council resolutions on this same matter by attempting to say that I have a declarable conflict of interest. The Local Government Act clearly says that it's the council's purvey to determine those matters based on the questioning of other councillors and providing information at the time, and that's been done, and it's been recorded in the minutes in accordance with the standing orders. And so, you know, in accordance with section 911 of standing orders, it says, you know, a decision about a councillor has a declarable conflict of interest in a matter applies in relation to the council for participation in a decision and subsequent decisions about the same matter. We're here today for the subsequent decision, you know, about the same matter. We've been here twice already, and now you're trying to make it a third time, it would appear, by falsely declaring that I have a conflict of interest when clearly a majority of councillors said I don't.
Sorry, firstly, Councillor Enright, and then seek to respond, and you've misrepresented me.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like clarification on Councillor Swanborough's opinion that a conflict of interest cannot be revisited. So if I can have some legal guidance on the interpretation of our standing orders regarding his opinion.
I just refer back to the governance manager's opinion, which is contrary to your own in relation to that matter.
So, so I'm seeking, I think you were seeking clarification from the officer.
Yes, thank you. Yes, sorry, from our governance team.
So I think sorry, Councillor, just to clarify, you speak a little softly and a little far away from your microphone sometimes, and that's not a great combination. So I think if I'm just trying to help the GM here, is it right? Your question is to seek clarity about what are the circumstances where a conflict of interest can be should be revisited again in the future. Is that a summary or is it different?
Yes, no, that's fairly well it, Mayor. Just I need clarification on the claim by Councillor Swanborough about what can or can't be revisited in regarding a declarable conflict of interest.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to provide a response to that if that's okay through the chair. Yes, going back to just reference the standing orders, administration and conduct, and it was just referenced earlier by Councillor Swanborough 9.11, and I'll read out the full sentence. Councillor Swanborough reiterated the part of that sentence, but it says a decision about a councillor who has a declarable conflict of interest in a matter applies in relation to the councillor for participating in the decision and subsequent decisions about the same matter. And this is the rest of the sentence, unless there is a change to the councillor's personal interest and or the nature of the matter being discussed. That particular section 9.11 doesn't prevent council in perpetuity from ever revisiting that. And even if there wasn't, so it doesn't prevent, provided someone forms a reasonable suspicion that something's changed, and then the procedures say that under 7, reporting a suspected conflict of interest under the standing orders procedures is that if a councillor at a meeting reasonably believes or suspects that another councillor has a personal interest in a matter prescribed or declarable, then they can raise that. And going back to just clarify in relation to the motion of dissent in relation to the point of order ruling, that has to be where the chairperson has decided on a point of order, but he's done so and failing to comply with proper procedures or in contravention of the standing orders, the Local Government Act or regulations, or it's beyond the jurisdiction power of council. So the clarification is that the raising of the suspected conflict, the argument being put forward for the motion of dissent is that's done so outside of the proper procedures, and that's obviously a matter for council to decide whether that was or was not, bearing in mind what the procedures and standing orders say on that. If that's answered your question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, John.
So just to, I believe I should reasonably respond to Councillor Swanborough's comment or assertion there. As I said when I made the original determination, this was new information and new aspects creating a conflict that have occurred since the 12th of January. I've tried to clarify those in a response to Councillor McConnell's request for additional clarity. I've tried in the way I've described them to respect the confidentiality of matters along the way, and we've dealt with some of that, but there's still other matters that sit out there. So this is not about, to be clear, this is not about the ability to request, was never about the ability to request a special meeting. It was about the additional decisions that were made around that decision. And this is particularly so about the determination. That wasn't the discussion of conflicts of interest, the determination, which is what that communication suggests, the determination that conflicts of interest now no longer exist is a proper consideration for public consideration in an ordinary meeting, not the private consideration of a subgroup of councillors without some of those affected councillors present. There is nowhere in legislation that allows for a subgroup of councillors outside of the operation of an ordinary or a special meeting to determine conflicts of interest. And certainly to then communicate that outcome to the minister on behalf of council, without that being under the auspices, again, of the ordinary meeting, particularly where there is a resolution, which is in today's agenda, regarding matters to communicate to the minister. So, Councillor Chalk, you're wishing to speak?
I just want a clarification. You said that there was sought the minister, that we wrote to the minister to determine what subject. I don't believe anyone has written to the minister in reference to the item on the 12th of January.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm referring to the statement in the now tabled document that says the Honourable Minister and Deputy Premier has been advised there no longer exists any conflicted councillors as identified at the special meeting of the 12th of January 2022, which actually wasn't what that meeting identified. It identified a question mark that needed determination from the Minister, by the way, so it's misrepresented what was actually at the meeting. And then it goes on to confirm that the given rise to the alleged conflict has been withdrawn and confirmation of this action has been supplied to the Minister. That's been signed by all four. So it appears, and my reasonable suspicions are based on what I am seeing, that a decision was made, two decisions were made, one to determine there's no longer a conflict of interest, whereas I believe the legislation and standing orders consider that conflicts of interest can only be, with any matter, need to be dealt with within the proper processes of an ordinary or special meeting, and certainly cannot be dealt with by a subgroup of councillors who have appointed themselves to make that determination. That is contrary to the proper interest of good governance.
Mr Mayor, I'd have to disagree on that.
Well, Councillor, I'm just elaborating.
Mr Mayor, I can provide additional information too right now to the meeting to help understand this particular issue. The issue was that whilst I was kicked out of the meeting for most of it in confidential session in the last meeting.
Point of order, Councillor. You were not kicked out of the meeting.
Colloquial saying.
Point of order, Councillor.
I kindly offered to leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Don't be offensive and misleading in your comments.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. While I was out of that meeting, you raised that all of the councillors had a conflict of interest because you said something that I disagreed with. There was no legal advice for your assertion that every councillor had a conflict of interest. There was no basis for it whatsoever. I personally think it was far-fetched and frivolous, vexatious. But you can have your opinion. You're entitled to that. But it was on that basis that the meeting stalled. Now that's new information.
Councillor, it is deeply disappointing that you are now disclosing the content of a confidential meeting in public, again showing disrespect, my view, for the chamber, and I do want that noted. The motion that was publicly discussed by the councillors was based on a discussion of a reasonable suspicion that needed additional clarity because of the complexity of the matter. And that was what the resolution of the meeting concluded. Wasn't my direction, Councillor, it was the resolution of the meeting. And so to go and disclose what you believe was the content of a meeting which you've already identified that you chose not to be part of for significant parts of, is equally bemusing for me. So that's why that motion was prepared to simply seek guidance. That's all it was. It didn't indicate that there were conflicts. It simply said we need guidance on this matter. And we agreed to that outcome. And I believe we agreed with a 5-2 motion. Now, to then just 2 days later communicate that because of actions still not properly communicated to council through the proper conduit, but communicated to a subgroup of councillors outside of the proper process of that matter. And councillor, that's again a fact that was identified, that there were prescribed communication channels for that matter.
Mr Mayor, that's not correct either.
Well, I'm sorry, councillor, it is very clear from my point of view, having been involved in that matter.
Have you seen the letter, Mr Mayor, at all?
Sorry, councillor. In the approach to that matter, councillor, subsequently all councillors have seen the following letter after the matter has been withdrawn. However, the process for that to be communicated was still governed by that independent jurisdiction. And the process that had been put in place for that matter, it was quite clear about how communication was to take place. That's my view. I'm expressing my reasonable context on this. So I accept it. So, Councillor, I don't, this isn't a place for, unfortunately, we're now debating the merits of your conflict of interest. All I was identifying, again, back to the motion of dissent, is the basis for raising the conflict is new information that has not previously been considered by non-conflicted councillors. It is not the old conflict of interest. This is a specific set of matters that didn't exist prior to the at the 12th of January event and were not previously considered. And I'm simply fulfilling the obligation of what I have my reasonable suspicions to provide that information for proper consideration by non-conflicted councillors. And that's all I can respond to your other assertions. So, Councillor McGuinness.
Yes, Mayor, a comment and then a question, please. My recollection of Councillor Swanborough leaving the confidential session was that a number of councillors, including myself, suggested that it's probably better if you're not there while we're discussing this. Did we take a motion? No, we can't take a motion while we're in closed session, but there were a number of people suggested to, and I don't remember who else did it, that maybe it's better you're not being here, and Councillor Swanborough obliged. Could I ask, since that meeting, there was that's why the meeting stalled, because there was a suspicion of the Mayor that we all had a conflict.
Again, Councillor, please stick to what is in the public motion. It is offensive to breach what was discussed in the confidential meeting. Stick to what was in the motion.
Okay, well look at the motion. Well, the motion was that we actually seek advice to the Minister. Have we taken legal advice in regard to that, the assertion that was made about all of us, or four of us having a conflict?
Councillor, what was the motion?
The motion was that we asked the Minister, but we had quite a number of discussion on why we could and why we couldn't. That if there was if there was less than a majority of councillors present because of a conflict, we could not vote on it, and that was suggested to the meeting. If four of us were conflicted.
Sorry, Councillor, you're going into the content of a confidential meeting. None of that. You're really, the disrespect for process is mind-blowing, and
Mr. Mayor,
I'm just asking
point of order.
Respect.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move a procedural motion. You know that.
You already have a procedural motion, Councillor.
Yeah, I know. We need another one. I think at this point in time, you know that the information that's been provided by Councillor McGuinness in relation to what happened in that confidential briefing now be made public.
Well, Councillor, it's a bit pointless to have a motion when people have breached confidentiality to try and cover up.
That can be fixed. That can be fixed by.
Excuse me, Mayor. What were those words you used there?
Well, I'm concerned that by
it was aimed at me.
I cover up, because my concern, Councillor, the confidential discussion has already been put out there. So putting a procedural motion to now try to rectify that is a bit like Councillor McConnell's comment earlier, the suggestion that withdrawing something is, after it has been inappropriately put up, and pulling it back doesn't have any merit. I'm simply pointing out we all have an obligation to respect the confidentiality, and that seems to be totally foreign concept in a number of these conversations. And it is, yes, it's difficult having confidential matters. So the procedural motion that sits in front of us, Councillor Swambra's put a motion of dissent, and that's there, the wording is there. I have explained, councillors, that the existence of new information, which the legislation actually requires be considered to, that is, a changed circumstance or a changed interest or a reasonable suspicion of that, needs to be considered at any time. It's that potential change which is what is the purpose for the discussion of conflicts of interest being a recurring action.
Mr. Mayor, the argument that you put forward, I don't believe, has a lot of weight. It is very clear that you can voice your opinion about this and say, "Oh, I've got new information," and that's well and good. But in relation to this motion of dissent, the matter hasn't changed. The matter is still about whether we proceed to renew the CEO's contract or not. Nothing's changed. On 2 occasions now, all of this information, including the information that you've been brought up to speed.
Point of order is being called. Councillor, please pause. Councillor,
the items on the agenda are purely about governance. They are not about the reappointment of the CEO. It's about opportunity to set the record straight.
I disagree.
So do I. It all goes back to the 9th of November motion that hasn't been resolved.
So Councillor, can I just clarify whether there's agreement about the agenda items for today? There are 2 agenda items that I'm trying to manage to, and I have been considering conflicts in relation to in my focus, and that is a very different place to what you're discussing. And discussing the 9th of November is irrelevant today. We have the business matters of the meeting today. If you had dissent with what was the proposed agenda, that was the time, not sitting here today. So I can only deal with the notified business matters that are before the meeting today, 5.1 and 6.1. And I've identified in good faith what I see as new information pertaining to conflict of interest regarding those 2, that creates a reasonable suspicion of not being able to consider those matters. Now, I'm not at the moment in this motion, to be clear, this is not about prosecuting whether or not that constitutes a conflict of interest. It's really a conversation about whether or not it's new information, because if it's new information that, I believe, addresses Councillor Swambra's concern.
No, that's not correct, Mr Mayor. You're redefining what my motion of dissent is. My motion of dissent is that under the standing orders, you do not have the standing or the right to be declaring for the third time that I have a conflict of interest in the same matter. And the matter is very clear.
Point of order, councillor. That's not correct. You have ignored the governance clarification again. I believe the governance clarification was that if we can please, the acting CEO might assist, there is an important piece that you may not be hearing as the full statement, councillor. It's important to listen.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through the chair, if I can just provide again, reiterate the governance clarification on the standing orders relating to subsequent decisions around the conflict of interest relating to the same matter. This can be relitigated if there is a perceived change to the councillor's personal interests and or the nature of the matter being discussed. I believe, Mr Mayor, that provides some exception to the comment that this can't be litigated.
And those exceptions don't apply. There is no change to my personal circumstances, and the matter hasn't changed at all either.
Well, councillor, that's part for the discussion. I believe I've provided evidence of new aspects that present a different conflict of interest. A different conflict of interest, maybe with the same matters, but it is a different, I'm proposing, that's the debate, councillor. You're saying it's not a change in your personal
I guess we're going to have this debate and...
no, councillor, you've moved a motion.
Yeah, I move a procedural motion that the motion be put.
Let's put the motion. Those who support the motion of dissent?
I think we need to refine that to, as Sharon whispered in my ear before, it's not quite reading right at the moment.
Just, sorry, through you, Mr Chair, I guess in assisting that discussion, the point of order, which is what your clarity, you need to make particular reference to those 3 points around has failed to comply with proper procedures, is in contravention of the standing orders, Local Government Act regulation, or is beyond the jurisdiction of power. So if that's to assist the...
That's right. I think we need that. The Mayor's procedural motion should be that Council disagree with the Mayor's not upholding my point of interest, a point of order, I should say, that the Mayor is in contravention of section 9.11 of Council Standing Order Procedure, Administration Conduct, part. Sorry, that's not right. It goes back to the. It's section 20. Should be section 20.6. That after point of order, we should that it is his belief that he is in contravention. Yeah, that's right. he is in contravention of council standing orders, procedure, administration, and conduct.
So, it is.
No, it's not. It's not administration and conduct. It's 20.6 of standing orders.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair,
procedure.
Sorry,
Standing orders procedure.
to provide some clarity,
to the GM?
through you, Mr. Chair, just to provide some assistance, is it in the belief that the Mayor, pursuant to clause 20.6 of council standing orders, is in contravention of 9.11 is what I...
Yeah, that's probably, yeah, that's right.
Otherwise, we're going around the circle. Because that's what you're calling... So Sharon, through the indulgence of Councillor Swambra, 20.6 is actually contained within the standing orders procedure. Yeah, and the 9.11 is standing orders administration and conduct procedure, just for clarity.
Yeah, you can just, that's right. So just delete the last sentence. Oh, hang on. Oh, no, you better leave that in. Yep, that's fine.
I don't.
So it's just a question now. It's over to the councillors to determine whether the case that the Mayor has put up is right, or the case that I have put up is right under these circumstances.
Councillor, to your procedural motion, you've spoken to it. Do you wish to allow other councillors to speak to it, or do you want it to be put without others having a chance to speak?
Look, I think I think it's a procedural motion that doesn't need a seconder. If people want to talk to it,
well,
that's fine.
Councillor, you've said that you want the motion to be put. I'm asking,
yeah,
is
sorry,
that
that
what
one,
you
yeah.
intend?
Yes, I do want the motion to be put.
Yeah, and
It's changed considerably since what was up there earlier. I think it's probably right that there's any other discussion on it.
Okay. All right.
so, sorry.
Draw that procedural motion that it be put and leave it on the table.
So you've spoken to it as much as you wish to for now, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against?
Could I ask a question?
Oh, you want to ask a question?
Could I ask a question of Councillor Swambra? Councillor Swambra, would you read out the standing orders 9.1, the full paragraph, please?
I think we've just done that. You can read it out if you like.
So that was a no, was it? Was that a no? Okay, I'll happily read it out. Item 9.1 of Council's standing orders 9.11, 9.11, Council's standing order procedure, administration and conduct. 9.11. And it reads, a decision about a councillor who has a declarable conflict of interest in a matter applies in relation to the councillor for participating in the decision and subsequent decisions about the same matter unless there is a change to the councillor's personal interest and or the nature of the matter being discussed. If the non-conflicted councillors decide that the councillor can act in the public interest on the matter, then the councillor may participate in the meeting and be involved in processes occurring outside of a council meeting about the same matter, for example, briefing sessions or workshops. So this point, as confirmed by our governance team, does allow for any councillor to raise a potential declarable conflict of interest, providing there is a change to either the councillor's personal interest and or the nature of the matter being discussed, as outlined in our standing order.
So you were seeking clarification from the councillor. Was there anything you wish to speak against the motion now that you've had that clarification, because the councillor wouldn't read it? But
thank you, Mayor. We use standing orders as our Bible. It's not something that can be interpreted or misinterpreted depending on the situation. It's very clear that this allows the opportunities for reassessment of a conflict of interest if there is new information, if the councillor's personal interest and or the nature of the matter being discussed has changed. It's quite clear.
anyone speaking for the motion? Councillor Chalk.
Yeah, thank you. On the 12th of January at the special meeting, Council voted about a conflict of interest from Councillor Swamber, and we voted that he did not have one. The new information today presented by the Mayor is of no material effect to this decision. I think the decision's actually gone the other way. It's more positive, so I'm happy to speak positive for this motion.
Anyone else wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. At the meeting earlier this year in January, yes, we did decide on some Councillor Swamborough's declarations of interest, but I do believe that there is something new that has come along that we do need to, it is a confidential matter, and so it's difficult to talk about it in this session, but I believe that that is worthy of consideration and may have changed the situation.
Anyone else speaking for? Councillor McGuinness.
No, yes, Mayor. It's just as well William Tell's not around here because there's some long bows drawn in this, and I think it's pretty sad that it is, and we all have our own interpretations on things, but the subject we're talking about has been discussed, it's been voted on, and once again, to those listening out there, I apologise for what happens in this chamber. It's pretty sad, but I'll be voting for the motion.
I'll speak against the motion. If the contention that, and this is not about debating whether or not there is a materiality of a conflict of interest, this is about whether there exists new information that needs to be considered. If Councillor Swamborough's contention is correct, then it means that nobody's conflict ever changes. And in fact, those of us who attended the training know that the department made it quite clear that they anticipate that conflicts do change even with the same matter over time. They quite clearly articulated that to us because of the emergence of other activities or engagements or situations, and that they need to be considered on an ongoing basis, even with the same matter. That was quite clearly articulated to us, and it's quite clearly what our standing orders and the legislation considers, and therefore that's the basis on which I am presenting and fulfilling my obligation to share that information today. Anyone else wishing to speak against or for?
Yeah, I'll speak for the motion. I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor McGuinness's comments. It's a real long bow that's been drawn. People can make their own assumption of why. I don't believe that there has been a change in the circumstances. And I'll also apologise to the public because I did say to be over and done with in half an hour, and that was obviously wrong. So we'll keep going until this is totally resolved and we don't have to come back to any special meetings. And thank you.
Councillor Swamber, you wish to close?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, there is there is new information, and whether that information, adds value or not is what the council will be voting on right now. I personally believe the circumstances haven't changed. I believe that everybody around this table has an interest in the decisions that we're going to make here today. They should be here. There shouldn't be any attempt to exclude anybody. And I think that the information that's been presented, is a long bow, and we understand, why it might have been presented. But at the end of the day, I don't have a declarable conflict of interest here in this matter. We've debated this twice already. The matter is still a simple process. It's about the renewing of the CEO's contract, and the information, I thank the Mayor for his additional information that he's provided. It's now up to the councillors decided whether that is going to impact their decision when we put this to the vote.
Put the motion. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? Motion is carried. Divisions 1, 2, 5 and 6. And those against, Mayor, Divisions 3 and 4. So, councillors, I believe that means on that declaration, the councillors don't wish to allow that to proceed to consideration by unconflicted councillors, so I will progress to my next declaration. And my next declaration is I hold a reasonable belief that Councillor Chalk has a declarable conflict of interest in deciding on matters contained in items 5.1 and 6.1, which are the subject of this special meeting. My belief concerning Councillor Chalk is based on two aspects. I refer to public comments reported in the Fassifern Guardian online and in the print edition of November 17, 2021. These comments by Councillor Chalk were made following the resolution of Council pertaining to item 11.1 in the ordinary meeting of 9th November 2021. I believe these comments show Councillor Chalk formed and enacted his decision in that matter on flawed considerations, including suggesting Council wanted to go in a new direction, which can be seen as holding the perspective he saw the CEO as responsible for strategic direction, even though he should reasonably be aware that elected Council controls and determines strategy. Further, his comments can also be seen as holding the CEO accountable for the meeting structures of Council, which would again be a flawed basis for decision making, and these are also at the decision of elected Council. Once again, this would be an unreasonable basis for considering the CEO's capability or fit for the role, and a reasonable person would be concerned that such a flawed basis underpins such an important decision that affected the third party, the CEO, and may not have been afforded fair process. Further, I note that today's special meeting has been called as a result of a joint request signed by 4 councillors properly. I note that that request has at its foundation some engagement between Councillor Swamber as the initiator of the matter, still covered by confidentiality requirements, and 3 councillors, being Councillors Chalk, McConnell, McGuinness, outside of the reasonable and proper process for communication between the parties regarding that matter, and without engaging with other affected parties within that matter, including at least 2 other councillors. I point out that it is my understanding that Councillor Chalk, along with Councillors McConnell and McGuinness, had been properly informed about the processes in place for engaging between the parties on that matter. Further, the 4 councillors initiating the special request were properly aware of reliable legal advice that the changed circumstance advised to them by Councillor Swamborough cannot be relied upon until the expiry of 28 days from the 14th of January 2022. Further, I reasonably believe that his action in joining with 3 other councillors in making a decision to ignore legal advice made available to them, that proceeding at this time would be compromising the interests of Council and other parties, and seeking to proceed at this time could be seen by a reasonable person, provided the full information that the Council, by acting in this matter, has disadvantaged the position of Council and thereby ratepayers. I also note that beyond the request for a special meeting as a proper request, the Council, in concert with other parties, has made and communicated to the CEO decisions relating to 2 business matters that can only properly be determined and enacted through transparent process of an ordinary or special meeting. And that being those matters being concerning the existence or otherwise of conflicts of interest that can only rightly be made within the proper transparent process of an ordinary or special meeting. Further, I note that the Council, in concert with other parties, has also advised that they have communicated this decision to the relevant Honourable Minister without the proper authority to do so on behalf of Council and in direct conflict with an existing resolution of Council made on the 12th of January 2022. Further, I would observe that Councillor Chalk can be reasonably seen to have participated in a decision process affecting the position of Council as communicated to Council officers in a covert process outside the proper jurisdiction and transparency of either an ordinary meeting or a special meeting, beyond what is reasonable to form a request for a special meeting, and without the full involvement of elected, non-conflicted Council as is required by legislation for such matters. His participation in this process can be reasonably seen to have subverted the proper role of collected Council. On that basis, I believe a reasonable person would conclude that Councillor Chalk is pursuing interests other than the best for Council and ratepayers, including knowingly preserving the position of a private complainant against the interest of Council, and therefore it is not possible for Councillor Chalk to maintain an unbiased position regarding items 5.1 and 6.1 within the agenda for this special meeting. Councillor, you're welcome to respond. It will be for the non-conflicted councillors to consider.
Just a question to Councillor Chalk. Did you send a letter to the Minister as asserted in this allegation?
No, I didn't send any letters.
So can I clarify, Councillor, you signed a document saying that you had endorsed that communication going to the Minister? That's the document has your signature on it. The special meeting request has your signature on it. Sorry, Councillor. No. So, Councillor Chalk, the request for the special meeting has your signature on it, and that includes you have signed on the full content of that as being a process and a set of actions that you endorsed.
Yes, I signed that document.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question?
Well, no, Councillor, you can't. You're a conflicted councillor.
Nice one, Mr. Mayor. That is beautiful. That is classic.
Councillor, point of order.
Oh no, that's got to go down as a classic, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, point of order. This is meeting process that you have applied and followed, and very clearly on the 12th of January were very diligent about. It is for non-conflicted councillors and for Councillor Chalk to speak in response. And
can I just ask you, if there's 4 conflicted councillors and only 3 unconflicted, is there a quorum? Quorum.
So there's no need for a quorum to consider conflicts, Councillor. There is to consider the business of the meeting.
So if you put a conflict against 4 of us, only the 3 get to vote. Is that correct? I'm just asking.
It's only non-conflicted councillors who get to vote, Councillor.
So, but does there still need to be a quorum of council?
No.
Okay.
Non-conflicted councillors only, Councillor.
So what if there's only 1?
That's the way he wants it.
The standing orders and the legislation say that it doesn't require a quorum. That's
okay.
all.
It
doesn't say what a minimum number is.
Nice.
I don't believe.
Nice one.
I don't believe it says a minimum number. I asked that question.
Mr. Mayor, I might say in about 4 hours' time, I'll be the only one who hasn't got a conflict, it would appear.
Continue, Councillor Chalk.
Look, it was a pretty long document there you put together, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for that. The comments I made to the Fassifine guarding were taken out of context. They were subject to a complaint, and I'm probably know where that's come from now. So
Point of order, councillor.
I apologise, Mr Mayor.
Point of order.
That was
That was
out
out
of
of
line.
order. That
I
was out of
agree.
order.
And I've responded to that. Every allegation in that request, they're all incorrect. I was asked questions about the on workings of council, which I'm a part of as a councillor, and that was misrepresented into a statement about the CEO's contract. If you read it carefully, you'd see my comments about the CEO were that he was a good guy and I liked him and he'd done a really fantastic job. But I saw the council going in a different direction, which I believe is a pretty generalised statement, which as a councillor, if we can't make a statement like that, I think we're all pretty well doomed. So for you to allege that, I think it's quite
Again, point of order, councillor.
amazing, actually.
Point of order, councillor.
We know what you're doing.
I've simply provided information that I'm reasonably aware of that goes to a series of considerations, and I take deep offence at the slur, and I'm glad you withdrew it. Even if it were true, making retributive comments when people are fulfilling legislated obligations, not private agendas, is not consistent with code of conduct. So please continue. Councillor, is there anything you wish to further respond? Non-conflicted councillors may wish to ask other.
Yeah, the rest of the allegation, I can't remember them all, but I think it's a load of rubbish. I can't see any scope to that. We're non-conflicted. I still believe I'm non-conflicted. I'm perfectly capable of making this decision, so I'll leave it to the room.
Councillor, can I ask you a question, please?
Is there others who want to go first? You've said a fair bit.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to clarify, and I'm happy for others to ask first. So, non-conflicted councillors, councillor.
I just have a question.
Can I just, before, how am I conflicted if it hasn't been decided? You haven't made an allegation against me yet.
Councillor, I've advised the meeting.
Yeah.
If you want me to stop this,
no.
I've advised the meeting that there are 4 declarable conflicts. If you wish to stop this, and I'll declare all 4.
Didn't we all talk with Derek? So was I conflicted with Councillor Swanborough?
So we know, because we didn't discuss his conflict, councillor. We did not discuss his conflict. We were discussing the merits of the content, which is a different context, councillor. We were discussing a procedural matter, not a conflict of interest.
Right.
Your context is incorrect.
I don't believe that's the case, Mr Mayor. That was not the case. The case was that you ordered a point of order and I said you didn't have the right to make the declaration against me that you wanted, and that was confirmed by the council on a vote.
Councillor, you're right, but that was on a point of order about presenting information. It was not about determining a conflict of interest. It was not. It very clearly wasn't. If you believe it was dealing with a conflict of interest, then the other councillors shouldn't have been involved. Yeah. That's why they were.
No, that's just not right, Mr Mayor. You've got that wrong.
I'm not. I believe I'll seek guidance from governance where there are suspected.
Point of order.
Can I seek clarity, please? Point of order, please. Stop the conversation. I just will adjourn for a moment, please, about what I will seek in the adjournment, the clarification. My understanding from standing orders is that the process is where multiple councillors are identified as potentially having a conflict with the same agenda items, they cannot participate in the consideration of the potential conflicts of others with the similar conflicts with the same agenda items. Can we just adjourn for a moment and seek that clarification? I just wanted to put that statement there so that as we adjourn, people understand what we're adjourning for. In light of that advice, just to help the clarity, Councillor Chalk, with your permission, we will suspend the consideration of your matter for now and complete the other declarations, and then come back to address the second part of the matter. And further questions, Councillor West, to your point. I hold reasonable belief that Councillor McConnell has a declarable conflict of interest in deciding on matters contained in items 5.1 and 6.1, the subject of this special meeting. My belief is based on the following information. I note that today's special meeting has been called as a result of a joint request signed by 4 councillors. I note that request has at its foundation some engagement between Councillor Swamber as the initiator of the private matter, still covered by confidentiality requirements, and 3 councillors being Councillors McConnell, Chalk and McGuinness. Outside of the reasonable proper process for communications between the parties regarding that matter, and without engagement with other affected parties within that matter, including at least 2 other councillors. I point out that Councillor McConnell, along with Councillors Chalk and McGuinness, have been properly informed about the processes in place for engaging between the parties on that matter. Further, the 4 councillors initiating the special meeting request are properly aware of reliable legal advice that the changed circumstance concerning his private matter, Councillor Swamber's that is, advised them by Councillor Swamber, cannot be relied upon until the expiry of 28 days from the 14th of January 2022. Further, I reasonably believe that his action in joining with 3 other councillors in making a decision to ignore legal advice made available to them, that proceeding at this time will be compromising the interest of council and other parties, and seeking to proceed at this time could be seen by a reasonable person, provided the full information that council has acted in this matter to disadvantage the position of council and thereby ratepayers, whilst also knowing that to do so would benefit a complainant against the interest of council. I also note that beyond the request for a special meeting as a proper request, which was a proper request, the councillor, in concert with other parties, has made and communicated to the CEO decisions relating to 2 business matters that can only properly be determined and enacted through transparent processes of an ordinary or special meeting. Those matters being concerning the existence or otherwise of conflicts of interest that can only rightly be made within the proper transparent processes of an ordinary or special meeting. Further, I note that the council, in concert with other parties, has also advised that they have communicated this decision to the relevant Honourable Minister without the proper authority to do so on behalf of council, and direct conflict with an existing resolution of council made on the 12th of January 22. Further, I observe that Councillor McConnell can also be reasonably seen to have participated in a decision process affecting the position of council as communicated to council officers, in a covert process outside of the proper jurisdiction and transparency of either an ordinary meeting or a special meeting, beyond what is reasonable to form a request for a special meeting, and without the full involvement of elected non-conflicted council as is required by legislation for such matters. His participation in this process can be reasonably seen to have subverted the proper role of collected council. On that basis, I believe a reasonable person would conclude that Councillor McConnell is pursuing interests other than the best for council and ratepayers, and therefore is not possible for Councillor McConnell to maintain an unbiased position regarding items 5.1 and 6.1 within the agenda for this special meeting. Declaration 4, I hold...
Wait, can I...
Sorry, no, you asked to have the clarity.
Yeah, I know. Can we get a copy of this? Because that was about 5 minutes long and we need to be able to address these one at a time. I mean, you've probably made about 10 assertions in there on me, so I can't reply to anything unless I see this. Can we quickly get copies to each of the councillors so that we can read through this, whatever it is, and be able to note down exactly what you're claiming we have a conflict for?
First, Councillor, I'm putting forward reasonable suspicions and the basis for...
I don't know who this reasonable person is. Well, I don't know who he is out there.
Councillor?
If anyone's out there, if you can find this reasonable person, please send him in.
Councillor, it's disappointing that you're not, that you're treating with disrespect the proper process that I'm trying to go through. This isn't easy. This is not easy, making these declarations. It's never easy, but it does behove all of us to properly consider the matters and whether they cross that threshold. So please, Councillor, let me finish.
But while you're finishing, can we get copies?
Well, no, Councillor, please let me finish.
No? Okay. Thank you.
I hold a reasonable belief that Councillor McGuinness has a declarable conflict of interest in deciding on matters contained in items 5.1 and 6.1, the subject of this special meeting. My belief is based on the following information. I note that today's special meeting has been called as a result of a joint request signed by 4 councillors. I note that that request has at its foundation some engagement between Councillor Swanborough as the initiator of the private matter, still covered by confidentiality requirements, and 3 councillors, being Councillors McGuinness, McConnell and Chalk, outside of the reasonable proper process for communication between the parties regarding that matter and without engagement with other affected parties within that matter, including at least 2 other councillors. Point out that Councillor McGuinness, along with Councillors McConnell and Chalk, had been properly informed about the processes in place for engaging between the parties on that matter. Further, the 4 councillors initiating the special meeting request are properly aware of reliable legal advice that the changed circumstance concerning his private matter advised by Councillor Swanborough cannot be relied upon until the expiry of 28 days from the 14th of January 2022. Further, I reasonably believe that his action in joining with the 3 other councillors in making a decision to ignore legal advice made available to them, that proceeding at this time would be compromising the interests of council and other parties, and seeking to proceed at this time could be seen by a reasonable person, provided the full information that the councillor has acted in this matter to disadvantage the position of council, thereby ratepayers, while also knowing that to do so would benefit a complainant against the interest of council. I note that beyond the request for a special meeting as a proper request, the councillor, in concert with other parties, has made and communicated to the CEO decisions relating to an ordinary or special, relating to 2 business matters that can only properly be determined and enacted through transparent process of an ordinary or special meeting. Particularly concerning the existence or otherwise of conflicts of interest that can only rightly be made within the proper transparent processes of an ordinary or special meeting. Further, I note that the council, in concert with other parties, has also advised that they have communicated this decision to the relevant honourable minister without proper authority to do so on behalf of council, and direct conflict with an existing resolution of council made on the 12th of January 2022. Further, I observe that Councillor McGuinness can also be reasonably seen to participate in a decision process affecting the position of council, as communicated to council officers, in a covert process outside of the proper jurisdiction and transparency of either an ordinary meeting or a special meeting, beyond what is reasonable to form a request for a special meeting, and without the full involvement of elected non-conflicted council as is required by legislation for such matters. His participation in this process can be reasonably seen to have subverted the proper role of collective council. On that basis, I believe a reasonable person would conclude that Councillor McGuinness is pursuing interests other than the best for council and ratepayers, and therefore it is not possible for Councillor McGuinness to maintain an unbiased position regarding items 5.1 and 6.1 within the agenda for this special meeting. Councillor McConnell, you've asked for copies. I would have to adjourn to be able to go and facilitate that with some assistance for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We will Thank you. Councillors, we are now back into open session. Those copies requested have been provided. Non-conflicted councillors, you were considering input from Councillor Chalk. Is there further questioning with Councillor Chalk before progressing?
Mayor, I have a question for Councillor Chalk. The reference to comments made in a particular newspaper, perhaps the Fern Guardian, was it? What is your story with that, or what is the background to that information?
Yeah, I was contacted by the paper for a story. I answered some questions regarding the reappointment of the CEO. We just had the meeting prior to that. I was also asked generalised questions regarding operations of council and my thoughts on things as far-reaching as the direction of council and how I see things working. Unfortunately for me, that the story was all pulled into one, and it made it seem like all the comments that I made were in response to one issue, which they weren't. Subsequently, I've received a complaint from the OIA, so I've answered all them questions in detail, and I've added the full context to everything behind there, and I added in the question that I was asked and the answer I provided, which I believe shows that I didn't break any confidentiality from meetings, and also I didn't speak negatively of the current CEO. I actually spoke in positive terms of the CEO, and I withheld any other comment beyond that.
Could I just ask supplementary to that? Did you seek a correction with the relevant paper for that misrepresentation of your comments?
No, I didn't. I didn't really think it was worth it at the time. I didn't think it was too damaging. I didn't know that it would be brought back in this type of scenario to get me out of conflict of interest at that time, so I couldn't see the point. So no, I didn't do that.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors?
With reference to initiating engagement with with initiating engagement with the three other councillors, and did you participate in the correspondence to the Minister?
No, I didn't participate in the correspondence. I just was participated in calling for the special meeting.
Were you aware of the special meeting notice and the details in that when you signed that notice of meeting?
Yes, I read it.
And in that, let's bring that up. In that item, it outlined that 4 councillors participated in an action outside the correct process of council.
Point of order.
Sorry, you just want to clarify that question?
No, I've got a point of order.
Yeah, what's your point of order, councillor?
There is no problem with councillors meeting and discussing issues. We
Sorry,
just can't make discussions.
Councillor, that's not a point of order. What's the matter?
The point of order is that you're out of line with your question there.
So
It's inferring that
sorry,
we have colluded and done a criminal act, I suppose.
Councillor, thank you for clarifying that you'd like the question phrased a different way.
No, I did not suggest that at all. What I said that asked
Thank you
Marshall.
for clarifying that.
Yeah,
Could you
thank
consider how else to ask the question?
Did you participate with the 3 other councillors in the process of the calling a special meeting? And in addition to that, did you participate in the action of writing to the minister outside the process of the correct council procedure?
I didn't participate in writing the letter to the minister. I was advised that it was withdrawn, and that was the only involvement that I had with that whole agenda.
I'm sorry, what was withdrawn?
The matter.
So you weren't aware that a letter was being sent to the minister advising him of that?
I was aware that a letter was being sent, but not on behalf of anyone else but the person who was dealing with the matter.
So, Councillor Chalk, could I just ask if I may, Councillor West, in determining that there was no longer an existence of a conflict of interest for any conflicted councillors, whatever that term encompasses, what was your involvement in reaching that determination?
At the meeting on the 12th of January, I voted against the motion. I didn't believe we had a declarable conflict of interest at that meeting, and I still don't. I think it's absolutely absurd that that was put forward.
So, sorry, Councillor, that wasn't the question. The question was, in the letter that you signed to the CEO, the letter says the Honourable Minister and Deputy Premier has been advised that there no longer exists any conflicted councillors as identified, which wasn't actually what was identified at the special meeting, by the way, but was identified at the special meeting of 12th of January, and then goes on to say, as the action that may have given to that has been withdrawn. However, I'm trying to understand on what basis the decision about there no longer exist any conflicted councillors was made outside of the proper scrutiny as required by legislation.
Was that a statement, was it, or a
well,
question?
I'm curious on what basis. No,
I think you've already answered your own question.
Point of order, Mr Mayor, point of order.
Sorry?
You just made a statement and you just called it a decision. I don't understand that there was any decision made, and the allegations that you made don't seem to be substantiated.
So, Councillor, I have shared reasonable suspicions. Please don't start characterising them by the way your interpretation. I find that just not appropriate. My question to the council, I'll try and make it clear. The correspondence indicates, a reasonable person reading that statement indicates that a decision has been made about that a conflict no longer exists. There no longer exist any conflicted councillors as identified at the special meeting of 12th of January 2022. That's a very broad statement because there were a number of different conflicts considered with different parts of that meeting. However, my question is, regardless of which of those claimed conflicts were being considered, what was the process for reaching that conclusion that you have endorsed as a decision which, in my understanding of the legislation, conflicts can only be resolved in the proper structure of an ordinary or special meeting? So I'm trying to understand what was the basis of that conclusion being made? How did you come about it?
The motion put forward at the meeting on the 12th of January was that we were all conflicted because of the matter. The matter has been withdrawn, so a reasonable person probably would assume that if the matter is no longer in existence, that the conflict would no longer be in existence, I would imagine.
Well, but for starters, Councillor, were you aware that the matter reasonably remains afoot for 28 days after the withdrawal, and therefore the advice, including the clarification from the relevant jurisdiction and the subsequent legal advice clarifies that effectively means that it should be treated as remaining afoot for that whole time?
Semantics, I think, Mr. Mayor.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Supposition. You can't. You obviously, you're not party to the letter or the private communication between the minister that occurred, and so you can't make supposition.
Sorry, Councillor. I'm privy to what's in front of us, and what's in front of us and now in front of the public is quite clearly a statement that a conclusion was reached on behalf of any conflicted councillors, so two of whom certainly weren't part of this discussion, weren't involved in that determination on their behalf, that conflict no longer existed. They hadn't been involved in the discussion, and that was then communicated on the basis of that process. Is what I'm trying to understand, Councillor. All I'm asking is, I'm trying to understand where the legitimate process is for that to have occurred, and I can't see it. So can you give me any enlightenment, Councillor?
It was my opinion.
I'm sure there's much more. So,
could I move in a procedural motion, please, Mr. Mayor?
See what it is, Councillor.
I move that we adjourn this meeting until Friday, the afternoon of 1 o'clock at Friday, the 11th of February. This is going nowhere.
Well, sorry, Councillor.
No, that's my procedural motion, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
Let's vote on it.
Sorry, Councillor. I'm trying to understand what's the basis. Can I?
Well, the basis is you're stacking the deck. You've accused four of us of conflict of interest, so there's only three left,
Councillor.
And so we need to adjourn the meeting so that we can get some advice.
Point of order. That is an egregious allegation.
A reasonable person would probably agree with me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, you're alleging.
Not alleging.
You have, Councillor. You've made a very serious allegation. I'm trying to work through the proper process.
No, I've moved to procedural motion, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor. I note your.
I second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Could I suggest we ask between now and then we get independent legal advice, please?
Yep.
Councillor, understand. I just need to understand that when we return, you're expecting that we're returning to be addressing the same business items and continuing with the consideration of the same potential conflicts.
Yep. Sorry, that is correct, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor, I believe the specificity of the 11th might suit your personal agenda. It may not suit everyone's agenda. So I'd ask your forbearance that we consider that we find a time, because
well, if everyone's got their diary in front of them, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, I know that is a conflicting time for me because of involvement with other activities on behalf of council.
What activities, Mr. Mayor?
Well, you councillors should be involved in a morning activity.
Yep, correct.
And I'm involved in an afternoon activity, which is continuing activities with the Council of Mayors around advancing some of the waste strategy and preparing for next conversations, which is fairly important in the time frame with the state. So if we could consider the following week I'd appreciate it, and we look at some times once we can get timeframes. We shouldn't try to specify that today.
What about Thursday?
Sorry, what Thursday?
Thursday the 10th?
Councillors, as you should know if you'd recalled, that I am supposed to be participating in a delegation in Canberra on Thursday.
Right. No, yes, mate.
But as soon as possible within the progress.
The week, I'll move a procedural motion that we adjourn until the week of the 14th of February.
Let's make it commence. That's the week.
It's the week commencing.
Commencing the 15th of February.
Yeah.
Commencing the 14th of February.
Yeah.
14th.
Commencing the week of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I just add, again, sticking a stickler to the standing orders, arrangements for special meeting, which is on this is.
Yeah.
It's not just obviously just a. If we go to it. A resolution of the local government. So as you said, you can put a resolution there to convene a special meeting that we don't have to do now, as soon as practically possible.
No, we can adjourn this until the week of the 14th.
Are we adjourning?
That's the motion. So I believe that's acceptable.
Yeah. Actually, can I just change that so that this special meeting be adjourned until
Tuesday.
after Tuesday, the 15th of February, but before Friday, the 18th of February.
So whose schedule are we trying to sit around, Councillor? Are we considering
No, we're
everyone's
trying
or
to make
just
it in
some?
that week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
The week of the 14th, maybe?
18th.
14th.
No.
it's as soon as possible within that week. Within that week.
Yes. Yeah. Until the time to be fixed.
That doesn't
Monday,
seem to
14th.
work
The
for some.
14th. We've got stuff on.
Oh, yes, separatist.
Jeez, I've got a note number. I always forget that. Yeah. Better put that one in the diary. Yeah, that's happy with that.
Okay, we have a procedural motion. Councillor McConnell, you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thank you. Pretty self-explanatory, Mr. Mayor.
And wishing to speak against the motion?
Just adding it to it, Mayor, could we have questions to the General Manager on legal issues we might want entered, or have legal people available on that day?
Too many people with your microphones on, Councillor.
I was about to ask that through you, Mr. Mayor, exactly what advice was being required. Obviously, in order for them to be prepped and ready to go to have that advice, we probably need exactly what the advice is being sought, knowing that they can't rule on if someone's conflicted. That's a decision of council, but however, just need some clarity in terms of what advice is actually being sought, and in reference to, we've sought previous advice before.
Can I just, you just said we can't seek legal advice on if someone's conflicted.
No, that's not what I said.
What did you say?
I said you can't seek legal advice if determining someone's conflicted on the matter. it's up to a council to determine. They can give you an
Yeah,
opinion.
that's right.
Yes.
It's an opinion.
Yeah, if
So
that's,
it's not,
but that's what I said. I don't know whether that was what the advice was being sought. I just put that there as a point of clarity. If you were seeking an opinion whether someone was conflicted, the legal advice won't provide that. That's all.
but we just did.
Sorry?
Sorry?
Didn't we just seek legal advice not long ago?
Not on conflicts of interest. I don't see that. The legal advice, and this is a question Councillor McConnell put, a question that's still open, where you sort of opened what the dynamics of the meeting had changed from what the order of business that you provided to swing it around and make it the mayor's meeting, as quote unquote. I took offence to that. Again, we're at item 4 of the meeting where we're discussing the conflicts of interest. There's 2 matters at 5.1 and 6.1 which refer to that business. So in saying that, the legal advice that was sought previously was not around whether someone was conflicted. It was defining, on that separate matter, what constituted council being named as a respondent. That's what, there was no...
Before that.
So
Sorry, through the chair, if I can just provide some clarification. Legal advice can be sought around conflicts of interest. The lawyers cannot determine whether there is a conflict of interest.
Thank you.
Surely, GM, that applies to every bit of legal advice we have. Just, it's their opinion, and hopefully they know more about the law than what I do and what everybody in this table does. I don't know whether they do sometimes, but that's what we pay them for.
Yes, Councillor McInnes, I would suggest that we seek legal advice to minimise risk to this council, and it's in our best interest to act in accordance with the legal advice.
thank you.
And through you, Chair, just on that basis, could that be added to the resolution to give that clarity? I still don't know what, to the motion, sorry.
And can the briefing be made in writing so that we can see what brief was also provided to the solicitors?
So I believe it's an additional sub-point that, yes, I believe what the request from the GM to Councillor McConnell to consider including is that also for the additional to that timing, to that a separate point is to also engage, is what you're seeking.
No, can we do that for a procedural motion though?
Well, you're just trying to create what you want.
Yeah, no, procedural
meeting.
Motion is to adjourn, but we can't add in.
You can add for what purpose.
Yeah, but we can't authorise that legal advice.
Well, if your purpose for adjourning is to enable.
Seek legal advice and just leave it at that.
I thought you were saying to authorise.
No.
The purpose of the agreement.
Yes, yeah, to enable councillors to seek legal advice. Thank you.
No, but the method for that needs to be clear, that it's actually, because that says a very different message to me to what was just discussed. This is not about councillors all going off to their personal lawyers.
Council or councillors?
Oh, I just thought it was council.
Well, not to seek, I think to receive.
But so, Councillor, if I can just clarify.
The reason for the adjournment is to enable councillors to receive, to seek legal advice.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a
That's a concerning
word, just a cautionary warning, I guess, mindful of what you disclose to external legal could be contradictory, in disclosing confidential matter, whereas seeking on behalf of council.
Is your intent, Councillor, can I just try to understand so that we can try to, the intent is to try and provide questions that can be documented so they're visible back at the table, through the construct of governance oversight to council lawyers so that the advice can then be brought back. It's not to go to a range of independent lawyers, it's to go to to consolidate the questions and have them considered in a proper context. Is that what you're endeavouring, or are you wanting open slather to go all over the place? Because that at the moment is that reads like everyone's going off to visit their lawyer, which I didn't think was what I heard as the first intent, was to actually for councillors to be able to put forward questions and then to properly inform and bring forward a legal advice.
To have input into the legal advice. So we give you the questions.
Yeah, okay. Instead of seek, to enable councillors to have input. Or provide questions for legal advice.
Seeking legal advice.
Seeking. Yep. Thank you.
So that's back in. Thank you.
Providing questions to whom? Providing questions to whom?
That's probably a bit, it'll be back to governance.
So we can, I think we can finesse how quickly that needs to be, and obviously that will be properly through the officers of council with the proper process.
I intend this legal advice to be in the open as well, Mr. Mayor.
Well, councillor, that'll be a decision we'll make on the day.
Yep. I'm just letting everyone know, open and transparent is what we've been saying. So I'll be, as I did last time, I didn't vote to go into closed, and I won't be voting to go into closed to have this legal advice hidden in the dark.
Councillor, I think that's a poor characterisation. The use of confidentiality is relevant at times to properly preserve the interest of council and needs to be considered on its merits, not a blanket statement suggesting the proper use of that is wrong, I believe. So just that editorial. Yes, Councillor Swanborough.
Mr. Mayor, I just think that in the General Manager's advice to the solicitor, he just needs to foreshadow to them that council may consider that this will become a public document.
Just on that point, and I've just got my note, Councillor McGuinness raised the other question about sending questions, but also having them available on the day as well. Was that required? That was originally raised about having them.
I think we've wasted that much time here that we, with some good legal advice, I think we might have curtailed this a lot quicker than what it has, and I think it's have them at least available if needed. Yeah, not necessarily in person. I think on phone. Yeah,
but on a fixed phone, not a mobile.
It's probably easier if they were in person. It's same time. It's their hours. So
either.
So, hello. We're just confirming. We're just tidying up a technical clarification at the moment.
It actually doesn't need a seconder.
No, it didn't need a seconder. I just ignored it.
You can take that off. It's a procedural motion.
Is there some additional technical advice we need to consider?
Yeah, just through the chair, just perhaps with some clarification and with the approval of the councillor moving the motion, perhaps at the end of that, after advice, on behalf of council, might make that clear that councillors are providing questions, seeking legal advice on behalf of council, not individual councillors. If that can help, because someone reading that particular motion, it's not quite clear exactly whether it's on behalf of council, individual councillors.
Does it matter if it's individual councillors?
Well, we have policies in relation to individual legal advice, and I'm just trying to clarify that we're not, the motion's not authorising councillors to get their own individual legal advice is the only thing that I've got some.
Okay, on behalf of council then.
But, John, could I just ask, I seek legal advice, especially when the finger is pointed at me on numerous things, and I seek other advice from experts in that field too, to protect myself. I've never expected council to pay for it. I don't know whether other councillors or anyone in the room does do that, but I certainly never put a bill in and don't intend to put a bill in. But I do seek my own when, as I say, when fingers are pointed at me. And it's becoming more and more frustrating, of course.
I can provide some response to that, Councillor McGuinness. I guess, yeah, there's nothing stopping you seeking your own individual, and I'm obviously mindful of the necessary matters being discussed. And just secondary to that, the question around whether or not other councillors are seeking, the policy states you have to get approval from council, so you can't go out and get independent legal advice for council to pay unless it comes back to council and council resolves that to be done. But there's nothing stopping individual people paying out of their own pocket. Which is what you refer to. But any matters where a councillor is seeking advice, that has to come back to council for approval.
Yeah, I guess the other issue too is to reiterate the risk to you when in the circumstance where you are seeking independent legal advice of disclosing confidential information of council in the process of that that interaction. So you just need to be aware of that risk.
Thank you. Quick one on that then. So if a OIA complaint has been made against me in relation to my actions within council,
I'm not sure that's relevant to this matter, councillor, and you might want to take that advice separately, councillor, but I don't think that's relevant to the matter we're considering now. That might be relevant to considering legal support, but that's not the matter where you're opening the conversation up into an area that's not relevant to what we're talking about now. I'm just going to ask you to take that up in a different way. Okay, we comfortable with that? Are there any more technical concerns?
fire away.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I only got C in English, but I've just been pointing out, again, it's just a wordsmithing. If it was just to enable councillors to provide questions sorry, Sharon, if you type it, and I'll read it. Yeah. For the purposes of council seeking legal advice.
Yep. It's just a different sentence structure.
Meeting be adjourned until the time of Tuesday, 15 February 2022, but before Friday, 8th February 2022, to enable councillors to provide questions for the purpose of council seeking legal advice.
So you're saying it's either Wednesday or Thursday? After Tuesday, before Friday. Sorry, I'm just pointing out what you're saying.
Yeah, fixed between Tuesday.
It's actually after Monday. It should actually be after Monday for clarity.
Okay.
Or before Saturday.
Between Tuesday.
Or just in the week commencing Monday the 14th.
Yeah, anyway. Rightio, so the motion is now that this special meeting be adjourned until a time to be fixed after Monday the 14th of February 2022, but before Saturday 19th of February 2022, to enable councillors to provide questions for the purpose of council seeking legal advice.
May I just provide another clarification? That suggests that the time will be fixed after Monday the 14th of February. not that the meeting will take place after Monday, the 14th of February. So I would just amend that to suggest.
To occur.
To occur.
To occur rather than be fixed.
Yes.
Is that okay, councillor?
Yeah, correct. That's okay.
This special meeting be adjourned until after Monday, the 14th.
It was just that.
Will this special meeting be adjourned?
To be
until
resumed.
Yeah. After, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is now that this special meeting be adjourned to be resumed after Monday the 14th of Feb 2022, but before Saturday 19th of Feb 2022, to enable councillors to provide questions for the purpose of council seeking advice. Legal advice, just checking. I knew you'd be onto it. Legal advice.
Okay. Councillor McConnell, do you want to speak any further to it?
No, I think we've done it to death, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against it? Wishing to speak additionally? Put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. It's a miracle. Thank you, councillors. We can adjourn there for today and continue with due process. Thank you.